Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President and CEO, Georgia Power Company, Kim Greene. Joining her is U.S. Representative Drew Ferguson.
Well, hello, everybody. And wow, holy cow, what a journey building that nuclear plant was. I want to thank the governor, thank you, public service commissioners, thank you to our partners, Oglethorpe, MEAG, City of Dalton. Congressman, thank you, your colleagues in Congress, everybody who supported us along that way. We did prove that we can do hard things in Georgia. And I had the privilege of, as a young engineer over 30 years ago, designing equipment for the first 2 units at that site, Vogtle Units 1 and 2. Vogtle Unit 3 will likely operate for 60 to 80 years. That means that unit will be providing power to citizens in this state beyond the year 2100. Now that's a long-lived asset. So tell me just a little bit, Congressman, about your thoughts on the significance of that type of nuclear generation in Georgia, and also just a broader perspective on the United States and our goal of energy independence.
Well, first of all, again, congratulations to everybody that's been involved in this project. And you talk about bipartisan leadership. Doing the nuclear production tax credit was a key component to getting this across the finish line. And having the relationships to have the tough conversations when we needed to, but also having the will in this state to do something that had not been done in decades. And what we've done is not only done it here, but we've built the muscle memory to how to do it in the future. America must be energy independent. As we go through the process of determining the best types of energy, we truly need an all of the above policy. And nuclear has to be at the core of that. It is something that can provide the baseline power that we need for a growing Georgia economy. You told me something one time that I found very interesting. Unit 3 will provide power for up to 500,000 families, homes and businesses.
That's right.
Or one data farm.
That's right, and that's really important to emphasize. One data center, one large data center, will use all of the power coming out of Vogtle Unit 3.
So if we think we've solved the problem, we haven't. We've taken a great step, but we're going to have to do this again and again and again, because as we look forward into our economy and we look at where we are right now with our tax code, we have a tax code that really reflects the physical economy that we know and that has been very supportive of growing manufacturing jobs and doing research and development here in the state of Georgia. But there's a digital economy that is growing much faster that is not reflected accurately in the tax code. And just the fact that we're building a nuclear plant that will support one part of one data farm in the digital economy shows that how we're going to have to modernize the federal tax code so that we can create fairness in the tax code between the physical economy that have served this nation and this state so well and the evolving digital economy.
Well, speaking of tax code, let's talk a little bit about some of the incentives that were mentioned earlier around some of the electric vehicle plants. Of course, Kia, the latest to announce a new line of electric vehicles, the EV9. Yep. And I know there are concerns about sort of the misallocation of credits and sort of the haves and the have-nots. So can you talk a little bit more about your perspective on that?
Yeah, look, when you have tax credits that benefit some states and not other states, it's unfair. And as Georgians, whether we're at the state level or whether we're at the federal level, we should be going to the mat every single day for our fellow Georgians. And having tax credits that work in some states up north but not in Georgia simply is not an acceptable solution. So we hope to get this rectified as we move through and look to work with our partners not only in the House but over on the Senate side as well to make sure that our fellow Georgians and our companies that are based here in Georgia that are growing and providing jobs and providing livelihoods have the access to these tax credits. And look, the tax credits, they are going to drive our economy in towards electrification. Well, whether you agree with that or not, or whether you think that's good or bad or not, or whether you think we're ready for that, it's going to happen. So we need to make sure that we're positioning Georgia well so that we're taking the fullest advantage of that. The biggest challenge that I see with the tax credits moving forward, excuse me, is that when we look at federal revenues coming in and some of the real challenges that we've got around healthcare, around research and development, around investments in our armed forces and our men and women that serve, we're now almost at $33 trillion worth of debt. And so when you advance almost $1.2 trillion of new environmental tax credits, that allows companies to take advantage of those, but that also relieves their tax bill due to the federal government to fund these vitally important programs that we all know are important for the nation and for our state. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to, again, have to go into the tax code and figure out creatively how that we generate revenue in a way that is fair, is innovative, and puts us ahead of the rest of the world. We should never take a back seat to China. We should never take a back seat to any other country in this world. We need to be leading the way, and we need to be effective in how we do it.
Another area of taxes that Chris Clark teed up earlier has to do with the R&D costs. And there's current legislation, the Build It in America Act, H.R. 3938, that proposes a return to the one-year expensing of R&D costs for businesses. I know this bill is tied up with a few other issues, but could you give us some background on this issue and share your perspective on the issue?
America is the best place in the world to innovate. We've always had a system that allows us to try things, to fail, to come back, try it again. It's what makes us better and different than every other country in the world. And we've got to be competitive in that arena. So research and development is crucial. If we fail to advance depreciation, or we fail to advance the R&D tax credits, we will fall further behind our competitors. It's something that we simply cannot afford to do. So leaning into this issue is important. Every business out here has the ability to do research and development, to deploy innovation, to make their companies more competitive, not only here in Georgia, but on the global stage as well. So as we go through this, and we've heard a lot of bipartisan support for this R&D tax credit and for the immediate expensing of it, we've got to get this across the finish line. Unfortunately, tax policy gets tied up with a lot of different things, but this one is one that we've got to recognize gives America a competitive advantage. And if we're all singing off the same page of the hymn book, dealing with our problems with the Chinese Communist Party, looking at threats, looking at global competitiveness, this is something that we should push forward on a standalone issue and make happen for the good of this country and our fellow citizens.
All right, wonderful. Well, a number of the provisions in the tax code, and you kind of talked about how complex this is. A number of the provisions in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 are set to expire by 2026. This could have a significant impact on our state's businesses and the nation's economy.
Yes.
Can you share your thoughts on the steps Congress should take now to preserve these provisions?
Yeah, so we should be moving ahead with these expiring provisions, and we should be sending a signal not only to investors around the world, but to our competitors that we mean business about being the number one place in the world to innovate, to grow businesses, and to sell. This state is where we are today because of good, thoughtful, conservative leadership that has put this state in a competitive position, not only in the U.S., but around the globe. If we compare Georgia to where other states are right now, we are leading the way, and that doesn't happen by accident. It happens because our governor and our state legislators have had the courage to do the right thing as it relates to tax policy and to the regulatory environment and to education and to make an investment in housing. We are leading the way, and we are different than other states, and we have the flexibility to do that. But keep in mind, no matter how hard we work here in the state of Georgia, no matter how hard our folks do here, we are hitting headwinds right now at the federal level because of inflation. We're seeing rising interest rates, we're seeing a downgrade of our credit, and we have $31 trillion worth of debt, and we have got to get that under control. The excess government spending, over the last 4 to 5 years, and not going beyond where we were in the pandemic, but going further than we needed to, is fueling inflation, which is driving interest costs, which is driving the cost of capital. It's hurting our ability to build new generation capacity going forward. It's hurting our ability to buy homes. It's hurting our ability, particularly for smaller businesses, to get up and going. We have got to stop inflation, which means getting the federal budget under control. If we do that, claw back the regulatory environment that's essentially $1 trillion in new taxes on businesses, then we have a chance to move forward, and we can continue the American dream.
Well, you talked just a moment there about education, and you've emphasized the importance of education reform in economic development. What specific policies are you advocating in Congress to improve education and create more opportunities for Americans?
First of all, we need to be doing things that encourage people to go into education at all levels. We in this state have an incredible asset, which is our technical college system. It is far and away the best in the entire nation. And what we need to recognize is that there are so many of our young people today and so many of our adults that are in the midst of changing careers. The best pathway forward for them to get into the workforce sooner rather than later, to become participants in this great Georgia economy, is to go through our technical college system. Things that we can do to boost technical college education throughout this country, but particularly here in Georgia, is something that we need to focus on. Also, we need to step back and look at what we're doing in higher ed as well. For too long, we've told too many of our young people the only way forward is a 4-year education. That is not the only pathway forward. We have got to recognize that. We have got to reward and applaud those that choose a different pathway. It is something that we have to change and we have to do. The whole idea of wiping out student debt but not changing the very system that led to this massive growth in student debt is absolute insanity. Let's focus on producing folks that are ready to go to work in a 21st century economy, whether it's in the physical economy or the digital economy. Let's get it done, but let's focus on the technical college system.
Great, great. Well, of course, here at the University of Georgia, there are a lot of people who did get that 4-year degree and are happy about that, but we certainly do support Technical College of Georgia.
We have to have a place to get 4-year degrees so that we can have a national championship football team.
Exactly.
I don't know what Georgia Tech's answer to that is, but I know what ours is.
So, hey, okay, we've just got literally a couple minutes left, and we had a breakout session earlier talking about housing,
Yes.
and not everybody here might have been able to attend that, but I thought it was a terrific session, and of course, certainly that's been a focus of yours in your district. And why don't you just talk a little bit about some of the policies that you're focused on that are going to help us provide housing for all of these great workers who are coming to our state?
I think the first thing we have to do is recognize why the cost of housing is going up so much. Borrowing costs are going up, material costs are going up. We have a huge labor crisis in the housing industry right now, just simply based off of the fact that we haven't had our young people going into it, but we're also about 3 million jobs short in construction nationwide due to a horribly broken immigration system that has got to get addressed and got to get fixed. So if you look at the fundamentals of it, you've got to drive down the cost of capital, you've got to improve the supply chains, and you've got to increase the labor force, and you've got to make sure that we're being creative as a state to understand how we can be investing in the right infrastructure that gives a competitive advantage to Georgia builders. I think those are the things that we should be looking at. There's also going to be a need for continued investment in the LIHTC program. However, what we have found is the tax credit program over the years has really disadvantaged our rural communities. And so one of the pieces of legislation that we're co-sponsors of fixes that problem. It gives about a 30% tax credit to housing that is built in our rural communities, because we've got to close that economic viability gap in a way that's different than what we've been doing now. This program hasn't been changed in about 40 years. Updating it is going to be important. I also say, and I say this to our local leaders, I'm going to put my mayor's hat on for just a minute. You've got to be creative about how you do planning and zoning in your communities. Recognize that sometimes you're going to have to change things to meet the needs of a young workforce that wants to have home ownership. And so I think the zoning and planning is going to be a key component in that going forward.
Wonderful. What a great way to end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you for your 15 years of service in Congress. Really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.